Aloha! Welcome back to Aravinda Show. I'm your host, as always, Andrew Crusoe, and today I'm honored to be joined by Steve Pavlina, author, blogger, speaker, once upon a time podcaster, and so much more. He's probably more passionate about personal growth than anyone else you've ever met, and his articles have been featured in USA Today and The Guardian and a host of other publications. He's also the author of Personal Development for Smart People, a book that I love, published by Hay House. That was a while ago, but it's worth mentioning. Lately, he's been more focused on online courses. He did a course earlier this year called Stature that is focused on developing your inner character. I'm sure we'll get into that during the interview. And honestly, he's been an inspiration to me since 2005, which seems like 100 years ago in internet times. He's just an incredible human being. His personal story is inspiring and amazing. What he's come through is incredible to me. Steve, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Andrew. Happy to be here.
I have a lot of questions for you because your life has been so fascinating. But what I'd like to do is sort of start at the beginning and just see how it flows. And if you've listened to any of the other episodes, I know you're a busy guy, the tone of this season of the show, this is season 3, has really been about internal listening and listening to your guidance system. So I'm going to sort of try to balance the yin and the yang in this interview and kind of introduce things and then try to lean back and not interrupt you.
Sounds good to me.
Because that's something that I'm trying to grow as a person, Steve. So you, right? Always. So you are currently in the beautiful city of Las Vegas, which is currently closed.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I'm in the beautiful city of Hilo on Big Island, which is also currently closed. How's your day going so far?
Great so far. Got up at 4:30 this morning, went for a run for about an hour, and then flowed into some work, wrote a new blog post. You know, just a typical work day, actually.
Yeah, totally. So you were born in Southern California, right?
Yeah, Santa Monica.
Santa Monica. And you were raised Catholic.
Yep, 12 years of Catholic school.
Yeah. You know, we have to touch on this, right? Because your growth journey to me is remarkable. It took you a while, as it takes us to calibrate to our inner selves, or our invisible self, or whatever you want to call it. And I guess I'm curious, I'd love to hear a bit about, because you tell this story, and this is one of your original articles, because I started reading stevepavlina.com like in the early days. I think I came across your site in May or April of 2005, and I came across still one of my favorite things you've ever written, because it's so it's so like playful and pushing your boundaries a bit, right? And you can probably guess what I'm thinking of. It's the 10 reasons why to never have a job, or 10 reasons you should never have a job.
Yep, 10 reasons you should never get a job. That's probably my all-time most popular article. That one was written in 2006.
Oh my God. Have I dropped a year?
It's okay.
Is this what happens when you get to your 30s? Oh,
you can always Google it. You have a missing year somewhere.
Oh, I got a missing year. Maybe it was okay. I'm getting old. But one of your original articles before that was talking about when you spent 3 days in a jail cell.
Yeah, that was the 2005 one. That was from
that might have been
the series on life purpose, essentially, and the meaning of life.
I love that series. And I guess, I know you've told this story a bunch of times, but I think my listeners haven't heard it yet. What led you to, can I be blunt for like a second?
Yeah, sounds good.
You were basically a clinical kleptomaniac in your teens, kind of.
Yeah, late teens, like 18, 19. I used to go out and shoplift quite a lot. Just going to like all different kinds of stores, and I just did it for the thrill. I mean, a lot of times I would just steal stuff like candy bars or cassette tapes or CDs, or and give it away afterwards. When I was in the college, I was living in UC Berkeley at the time at the college dorms, and I was going to college. Well, sort of going to college.
Is this when your GPA started with a decimal point?
Yeah. Well, not the first semester. The first semester I passed. I think I got maybe a couple of B's and a C that first semester. And then it started going downhill with the second semester especially. But my first arrest for shoplifting was maybe like a month into school.
Right.
I think it was maybe around October 1989, something like that.
So how long did that go on before you spent? Because that time in the jail cell, as you've written about it, and we'll put it in the show notes at it's myth.li, as in leopard, iguana, and because everybody should check out that article and should check out your site entirely. You've got over like 1,000 free articles now on personal and spiritual growth. Amazing website. I think you were the #1 personal growth website, or probably still are, for like a really, really long time. So how at that time in the jail cell, though, I'd love to hear, and I know you've talked about it before, but that seems like a major decision point for you in your young life.
Yep, it was. I remember it pretty well. It was my fourth arrest, actually. I'd gotten arrested 3 times for shoplifting, which was petty theft. So it was a misdemeanor, and I got off with like community service each time. So I'd have to, clean up trash in the streets and stuff like that. And then the fourth time, I got into escalating a bit because I met up with a partner and we started doing this kind of like tag team type of shoplifting thing, and we got more sophisticated with how we were doing it. So we were able to steal. We were able to steal more each time. We were stealing sometimes like $500, $600, $700 worth of stuff each time. And we would even go out like for a weekend occasionally and just drive around to a bunch of places and shoplift and just until we filled up the back of his pickup truck. And even one time, like we filled up not only the back of the pickup truck, but the cab that, we had stuff on our laps, like just stealing so much stuff. The truck was just filled with stolen goods. And then we'd just sell them. We'd sell them off later for maybe like 70 cents on the dollar and split the money.
Right.
It was not even something he was more into the money aspect, but I was just more into the thrill of it. I thought it was just fun and just, exciting.
That's the one connection I make, and I think that's part of, maybe it's in your DNA, is you've always been kind of a thrill seeker.
Yeah, I tend to be a bit of a stimulation junkie, and that can be good and that can be bad. Like I actually went skydiving one time, and I was like, okay, like not as big a deal.
Whoa, you were sort of nonplussed by. I want to do that. That's something in my
like, okay, jump out on a plane. I mean, it's like 5 minutes to the ground. It's you fall.
Right.
It's like I can do falling. But the jail thing was actually way scarier, and because of doing that, it made everything else in my life seem easier by comparison, like starting a business or taking various other risks and doing interesting personal growth experiments. Just to continue and finish up that story. It was January of 1991, and I remember it was overlapping Super Bowl Sunday because I was sitting in a jail cell in Sacramento on when the Super Bowl was happening, because I could see like the Super Bowl on a tiny TV from my jail cell.
Right.
So at that point, I got arrested for a felony. The limit for a felony in California at the time was like $400. So over $400, it was a felony, and below $400 of stealing, the total retail value of the goods you're stealing.
Right.
It was a misdemeanor. And so I was stealing $458 worth of stuff at the time. And so it just crossed over the felony border, which made it a much more serious crime. And because of my priors, I was looking at something like 1 to 2 years in state prison. Now that would have been probably the sentence, but I might have ended up spending less time if I actually had to go. And so I was in jail for 3 days on what's called an ID hold, because I didn't carry ID with me when I went shoplifting, and I didn't tell them who I was. So I gave them a fake name, and sometimes that worked. But this time it didn't, because they ran my fingerprints and they were able to eventually identify me. And then I'm like, oh no. So that was bad.
That's how they get you.
Yeah, and so I go to court, and they basically misprocess it as a misdemeanor. They process it like it's a first offense instead of a fourth offense. And I just keep my mouth shut the whole time.
Keep your damn mouth shut, I believe, is the way that you described it once. Now, was that a computer thing or like an
I still don't know to this day
error?
what happened. Like,
that would be so
what am I supposed to how do you look that up? It was from 1991, so
statute of limitations. Oh, you just have to get right.
Well, the most ridiculous thing was outside the courtroom, they had the docket listed, and it listed my other fake names I'd used for previous arrests. Like it listed aliases. How can a person have aliases in your system if it's a first offense? That doesn't make any sense.
No, there's no logic behind that.
Yeah. So thank goodness for the inefficiency or, stupidity of government or for bad computer programming, because they processed it as a first offense and I got off with 60 hours of community service. And then I just thought, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not going to test that again.
I would love. It's too bad they can't take photos in the courtroom, because like I would love the photo of your expression when they say 60 hours of community service, gavel smash. Like
I could tell you what it looked like. It would have looked like scared, and then like scared the whole time, because even when they're doing the thing that's going to let you off the hook, you still think at any minute they're going to look at some piece of paper that's going to change their mind. And it was only like when I left the courtroom that I was like, whew, big sigh of relief. And that, while I was sitting in jail during that time, I actually surrendered to the fact that I was going to prison. And it was kind of scary. I'm wearing the orange pajamas, at least temporarily, in the county jail in Sacramento. Well, we were in Sacramento, by the way, because we had stolen so much in the San Francisco Bay Area, including Oakland and San Francisco and San Jose, that we decided we can't keep hitting the same stores too often. So we would actually drive a couple hours to Sacramento to go steal there. And then we even started broadening to other stores, and that's where things got bad, when we went to a store that we weren't used to. But
let's go to Rancho Seco. We haven't been there yet. Oh my God!
Exactly. We used to go to Fresno, Modesto, anywhere with shopping malls and things like that, where we could we were used to stealing at certain stores, and we get good at it.
Did you go to Stockton?
Probably. Oh yeah, Stockton. I think so. I remember going to Concord and just all different places. Anywhere with a shopping mall, we've probably been there.
Oh yeah, you led into something that I was curious about. I almost forgot. Is what was the biggest thing that you stole? Like, how are you? Because I know small stuff. I've only accidentally stole something once, and I felt terrible, and it was candy. What? I felt terrible. Oh my God! But how do you? Like, what was the biggest thing that you stole?
Maybe a 27-inch television set. I mean, this is not the flat screen kind. This is like the big, cathode ray tube kind. They were really heavy. And
how do you do?
Yeah, giant, $300 sets of pots and pans, blenders, coffee makers. We got really good at stealing appliances.
But like, are you just like walking out the front door with these somehow?
Yep, with a receipt.
With the receipt.
With the receipt.
Oh, I shouldn't even ask how you did that. We don't want people.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I should share the details.
No, don't. It's like a return scam, right? Those are tricky.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, where you're returning stuff you never bought.
Oh my God. And so you get this wake up. So you're sitting in this jail cell and you're like, I'm going to prison. And were you thinking, after I get out of prison, like before they make the error, are you thinking, okay, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to be in prison. I'm curious about your thought process in that, because that's a dark night of the soul. I think you said you were 19. And you're like, okay, after I get out of prison, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to go back to school. What were you thinking?
I was sitting 3 days in jail, so I was mostly kind of emotional and scared, but then I also just felt like I did this to myself. It was like this weight of responsibility coming down on me. And I had to admit, it was nobody's fault. I wasn't blaming the security guard who caught me or the cops who arrested me or anything like that. It was just me doing it to myself. And I just thought how stupid and ridiculous this was. And I realized, okay, well, I'll be going away for a while. I kind of knew what the consequences would be. I was caught red-handed. There's not much of a defense here. So all right, the next year or two, or however many months, it's going to suck, but I'll get through that. And then I'm starting from scratch. I'm kicked out. I was also kicked out of school. I found that out after I got home from being arrested, I believe. There was a letter from the school telling me I'd been kicked out because I wasn't showing up to classes, and so that's when my GPA started with the decimal point, because I was ditching class so much.
Imagine that.
I didn't get kicked out of school for the shoplifting directly. I don't think the school even knew about that. It was just that. Although I did get arrested for stealing from the UC Berkeley student store one time.
Oh.
That was, I think, my second time.
So nothing was off limits to you.
It was just like
at that time.
It was just like kind of this leaning into craziness. It was definitely like a rebellious phase, and kind of shredding my old character and creating a new one who was just kind of this stupid criminal doing, wanting to do anything crazy.
It was Stevel.
Sure.
Wasn't that one of the old nicknames tossed around? I think it was back in the forum days or something. I think you talked about Stevel.
I don't recall that one.
No, Stevel was the thing. Didn't we used to talk about Stevel? Maybe it came out in one of the workshops.
That doesn't ring a bell. I don't know.
Oh, that's from something. I don't think I dreamt that. Okay, so they made the mistake, and then you started changing your life. I mean, that seems like one of the big, what we might call like forking paths of your life. It was like I have to take full responsibility. You're really taking hold of like that. The one side of your personal growth pyramid. You're taking hold of that power, and saying, I'm going to consciously create my future going forward. I can't keep going in this pattern. It's going to destroy me.
Yep. And it was hard because I didn't know where to begin. I wasn't into personal growth at the time. I just realized that the person I was not working, and I had to change, but I didn't know how. I didn't know where to start. So I started with the most basic stuff, which was like maybe a year or so. I just focused on recovery and not doing anything reckless or stupid, not doing shoplifting, not doing stuff that was illegal. I tried to drive under the speed limit. I moved back to LA. I just tried to be basically a good citizen and live a really boring life. I reconnected with some old friends from UCLA, and so I used to hang out at their fraternity almost like I was an honorary member. And they weren't like a loud, crazy, drinking, partying fraternity. They were more like a, let's have a games night fraternity type of thing. So it was a pretty chill place to go. We used to watch the original Star Wars trilogy, put those on VHS cassettes and play them throughout the night while we played a rousing game of Risk, if you remember that board game.
Dude, Risk is great. You just have to find people that are committed to it. That's a 4-hour commitment, but yeah, I love Risk.
Yep, it's a long commitment, and if you get knocked out early, it's really boring. But
yeah. You had to hold onto the purples. Australia's the key.
Instead of taking the risks, I basically just played the board game version, which was, a lot more boring and a lot less exciting. But I really had to tone down the craziness. I guess some people might think of it as what they talk about today being a dopamine detox, because you can get really addicted to the thrill and the high of doing crazy stuff. It got to the point where, I could go and steal a bunch of stuff and my heart really wouldn't even skip a beat anymore. I just wasn't feeling it anymore. So you just have to keep doing more and more crazy stuff to amp up that rush feeling.
It kind of reminds me of my state of mind when I was a couple years older than you, when I traveled across the U.S. when I was 22. And that was the first time we met in person, actually. And when you're using Craigslist to get around and couch surfing, going from the Midwest to California and Oregon and back, I really noticed I did have a different relationship with thrill. I was sort of like, well, that's cool. And it was a totally different benchmark. I think it's the closest I could compare it to. I wonder if I'm going to be able to sleep here tonight.
Yep. But when you have those kinds of stretch experiences, it makes other things seem like not such a big deal. Yeah. I want to start a new podcast. I want to start a blog. Those kinds of decisions, they scare a lot of people. They get all nervous and worried about it. And when you have some kind of reference experience you can look back on in your past where you'd had some, craziness or trauma or some kind of, wild adventure, it just makes everything else seem that much tamer and less risky by comparison. Mm-hmm. Because you think, what have I got to lose? If this is not going to land me in jail, if the worst case outcome is I lose my money or something or get kicked out of my, place to stay, who cares?
Right. You're not going to die. A bear probably won't eat you.
Yeah.
It's that funny concept though of we often allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by ideas or an email. And we have this funny relationship with flight or flight, or you know what I mean, fight or flight these days. And it's so mental. It's so based on beliefs, which is a big part of your work. So you were in the jail cell. You changed your life. I think that was the last normal job you had, right? In that retail job, as I recall.
Well, yeah, the retail job. I got a job working for $6 an hour at a video game store in Hollywood. That was after the jail experience, and that was part of my recovery process. And just I just tried to do the most boring job. I mean, it was okay. But it was just, retail sales. You're working in a video game store. It's nothing too exciting or profound, and just focused on trying to tone my life down, and that helped. That was good for like a year. But after that, I was like, okay, I need some kind of
You've been bored out of your mind.
Something more positive. It's like wanting to stretch in some way, but not go back to the old path that didn't work.
And then you met Erin around that time, right? Your ex-wife?
That was after I went back to school and then graduated from college. So I did go back to school, this time California State University, Northridge. And I set a huge goal for myself and graduated in 3 semesters. It basically started over as a freshman and just decided to put all that crazy energy into academics. In fact, when I was at Berkeley, my friend said, if you just took all that crazy shoplifting, illegal stuff you're doing, all that energy you put into that, and you put it into school, you would graduate faster. You would just soar through it. So I actually tested that idea, and they were right.
I remember reading about, because you wrote a fair amount of articles about that, and I remember like, I can't believe this is possible. Like your ability to focus. I mean, I think everyone has these innate gifts or propensities, right? And you had this ability to channel that energy. And as I recall, you were listening to audiobooks almost everywhere, or tapes, so like Dale Carnegie and Earl Nightingale, and you were able to. I think you double majored. Is that right? In 3 semesters or something like that?
Yeah. I got a degree in computer science and mathematics. And because there was so much overlap between them,
right.
If I just picked the right computer science classes, I would pick up a math minor automatically without taking a single extra class. And then I realized, well, it's only a few more classes beyond that to get a math major, because so much of the computer science and math curriculum is right. Overlapping.
Redundant.
So I thought if I just make the right choices, like if I pick numerical analysis for one of my electives, that counts for computer science and for mathematics. And it turns out you can do that. As long as you have enough units to graduate, you can, pick up a second degree. So I thought, yeah, why not? So I ended up getting a double major.
Okay, I just had a question surface that was in the back of my mind like 5 years ago. This is how long in coming this interview's been.
Or was it 6 years ago?
It might have been. Yeah, right. Exactly. Who knows? I got hit by a car last year, so give me a break. That's a fun story.
Wow.
Yeah. I got a concussion, and I didn't have a sense of smell for 2 months. It was a whole thing. But I luckily I have a thick skull, and I'm like 90% normal now. But my memory is not what it used to be. My anxiety is back down to where it normally is, but my memory is not perfect. But I feel like I'm a better writer now for some reason. It's sort of like given me a different perspective on my writing. And we got to talk about that too. So, but I want to make sure we hit some of these like real big tent poles of your background, because I think it really informs the way you're working now in a way. It just for people to get to know where you're coming from. So what I was curious about was how many credits did you have going into that? I feel you had like a few, so it probably helped a bit.
I had some because I took advanced placement tests in high school. And so I was able to transfer some of those in. And I also had some credits I was able to transfer in from Berkeley, but for the most part, I just basically started over, taking the freshman classes. So I had some of the I think I had maybe like a chemistry class covered and maybe some physics class covered, but the computer science stuff I basically just started fresh with that. And I think I took 31 units the first semester.
Wow.
And 39 the second semester. And then I think it was 37 the third semester. And the third semester, I even worked as an independent contractor on creating video games for a local software company, for a local game developer. So I kind of had a side job at the same time I was doing the classes. That's how. I just basically went all in on studying time management and just figured out how many inefficiencies there were in the academic system. And I just squeezed them all out. And I just, probably in the final semester, I ditched about 40% of my classes, because if I went to, say, a 50-minute class, but I concluded on my own, you know what? They're just going to lecture from the textbook, and I could learn the lesson in half the time, maybe a third the time, just by reading the text. I don't need to go to the class. I would skip the class. So there was all these little techniques I figured out.
Right.
The key was setting the goal to see if I could graduate in 3 semesters. That was actually my initial goal. When I looked at the schedule and I saw how many classes I could actually put into my schedule, I thought it's theoretically possible to graduate in 3 semesters. I'd have to take a lot of units, but it would be doable. And I remember one semester, the hardest was like I had this one Tuesday one semester where I had like 13 hours of classes in a row, pretty much back to back.
What?
So it was like starting at 9 a.m. and going till 10 p.m. because I had a night class from 7 to 10 p.m. So you're just like 13 hours in class that one day. And I'll tell you, I ditched that 7 p.m. class quite a lot.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, after 10 hours in class, in a row. I mean, you get I think I had like maybe 15-minute breaks between classes all throughout the day. And then around dinner time, there was like a 45-minute break. Like I think I had a class that ended at 6:15 and the next one didn't start till 7 p.m. So I had a little break for dinner, but I was just basically on campus all day. And that was kind of grueling. I remember the most grueling part was just lugging around a heavy backpack full of books for all those classes. So it was a lot of classes to have in one day.
I can't even imagine. Where were you going to school with this one?
That was at Cal State Northridge. In fact, I actually graduated just a month before the Northridge earthquake happened. I graduated in December '93, and the earthquake happened in January of '94. So if I hadn't done that, it would have been even harder to graduate. And my friends who were still in school at the time, they had a hard time getting their desired classes because of the earthquake.
Wow.
Because it really decimated the campus. They filled it up with a lot of temporary structures, and a lot of the buildings, they had to be inspected and so on, or couldn't be used because they were damaged. There was really quite a bit of damage. I moved just from being across the street from the campus. In fact, there was a parking structure that I lived across the street from, which was essentially pancaked downwards in the earthquake.
Whoa.
And a month before, I moved basically 8 miles away. It was still a really violent earthquake.
93. I'd moved to Wisconsin 3 years before that, but I remember the '89 earthquake. Woo! So the timing worked out great for you. But when you were doing this, did you have a idea that you were doing the contracting, like you said. Was the idea for dexterity software kind of in your head? Did you want to make games when you were studying? Was it something you had a goal to do?
I was interested in video games. I used to play a lot of video games growing up. I used to steal a lot of video games. I probably stole well over 100 Nintendo games. In fact, when I was doing the shoplifting stuff, we used to steal video game systems like the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, the TurboGrafx, and we sell them to people for like half the retail price. Then we come back to them later and say, are you a little tired of playing Super Mario Brothers? A little tired of playing Keith Courage? You want some, you tired of playing Altered Beast? Do you want some games? And we take orders for the games, and we go out and shoplift, and then we could exchange for the games if we wanted to. And it was crazy. I remember going out and sometimes okay, we have an order. We have to get 3 copies of Super Mario Brothers 3. That was like a hugely popular game at the time it came out.
That was a fun game.
Everybody wanted Super Mario Brothers 3. It was like just a really crazy popular one. So we I don't know, we sent so many copies of that one just to give it to all our friends.
Oh my God.
And the Game Boys were really popular too.
You were taking orders, Steve.
Yeah, we would basically take orders. Okay, what games do you want? And we would even suggest games for people. So it's like we were like game dealers or something.
Oh my God. It's safer than being a drug dealer.
I guess so, yeah. Although the games are kind of like, they can be addictive, so.
Right. But they're not a Schedule 1.
Probably not the same type of side effects, I think.
Well,
unless you play like 24 hours without drinking a sip of water or something like that, like on Twitch, as some people have done.
Oh God.
But that wasn't a thing back then.
No. So you but you leave college. And how soon after? This part of the timelines is slightly blurry for me, but I know you got married in the early '90s and went vegan around the same time.
So Erin and I met. Erin was my first wife. We met in March of '94.
Amazing person.
We met in person, and I was already gearing up to start my own business. I was kind of wrapping up the contract work I was doing in January of '94. I remember still finishing working on it like after the earthquake happened, and probably just a few more weeks after that, I wrapped it up. And then I thought, yeah, I want to start my own business and get something going. But it was kind of drifting for a while, trying to figure things out and like how do I do projects on my own. And I wasn't very efficient with doing that. The structure of school is very regimented, so that kind of supplemented my own discipline, and I could really focus on the goal. But when I didn't have that structure on my own of starting a business, it was a lot harder to get up to speed. I think a lot of people have that experience if they're used to being in a school environment or a corporate environment that's very structured, and then you go and try to do business on your own. Mm-hmm. You have to create your own structures, and you have to create your own accountability for that.
Yeah, and you have to become, in some ways, you have to wear many more hats. It's not as specialized when you're starting a business. Like, what's a DBA and how do we do it this and how do we file? And
yep, there was so much to learn. I mean, by that point, I'd already written 4 commercially released games, a 4-pack of games. They were all released as a single pack of Windows 3.1 games. So I could do the technical side. I could do the design and the coding and so on. And I teamed up with an artist to help with that eventually.
Was that Dweep?
That was later. That was 1999. So this was like 5 years earlier. But I kind of drifted through those first 5 years a lot, not really finding my footing, and just ended up sinking into debt. Mm-hmm. I ended up with about $20,000 in royalties for the other games I did, which was really nice to have, $20,000 come into your lap right after you graduate college.
Yeah.
So I put that into my games business, but then I blew through that in like 6 months. So it didn't last very long. And then I ended up, sinking into debt trying to figure out how to run a games business. I didn't have a business background, so I really didn't know what I was doing there. And all kinds of bad things happened. Like I got taken advantage of and just made, terrible choices and wrong business partners to work with. And it was just, kind of a sucky story, and ended up going bankrupt in 1999. So 5 years after I started.
Right. I think you said you managed to get your way into like $150K worth of debt, something around there?
$150,000 in debt, yeah.
That's
basically
a fair amount of debt.
Almost entirely unsecured credit card debt. So just kind of funding the business with credit cards, which was, kind of not the best idea, but it was a learning experience.
You were young.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
you know what? That didn't really faze me because of the previous craziness experience. So I just kept right on going. It's like declared bankruptcy, go back to work the next day.
Yeah, it didn't seem like that scared you, the way that you've written about the bankruptcy. You've written about it, you touched on it a few times in the articles of the over 1,000 articles on his site. Everybody should check him out. But in terms of, was it really like not scary for you at all? Like, oh, I guess I'm going to have to file for bankruptcy. Oh, well.
It wasn't scary. It was stressful.
Right.
Just like having to deal with that. Like, at one point, Aaron and I got kicked out of our apartment because we couldn't pay the rent. So we had to scramble to find a cheaper place to live. And we ended up getting a place on a really noisy street where like loud motorcycles would go down the street in the middle of the night and wake us up. So it was not the best conditions, but that's where I ended up writing Dweep, the game that really helped turn my business around and started actually making some money.
And that was right after the bankruptcy then?
Yeah, that game was released like shortly after the bankruptcy. In fact, I had to declare the game as one of the assets in the bankruptcy. Right. But when they asked me what it was worth, it's just like, I don't know, because we haven't released it yet. It's a product in development. It's, maybe worth something, may not be worth anything. And they, I even had to list other games, other shareware games I released on the side as part of the bankruptcy. Right. And, they asked me if they were worth much. And I said, no. And they said, why not? And I said, well, honestly, they're not that good.
Honesty time.
Which was the truth. So, they were making like collectively, I think 4 other games that I released were making about $300 a month. So it was not something the bankruptcy court was interested in as an asset. They didn't care. They're like, you keep the intellectual property rights to that. So it was good that I didn't end up losing any intellectual property because that's what was worth the most to me at the time.
Right. Huh. Do you feel like in some way those lessons, especially around finances and business, in your 20s? Because your 20s were, that was your 20s in the 90s for the most part, were somewhat inevitable to get you to where you are today? Or how much of that, how do you look at that these days? So like, well, that was part of my path of growth. And I mean, obviously it was, but it's sort of, some of that feels inevitable. Like you have to stumble your way forward.
Yeah, I mean, some people get lucky, some don't. I'm kind of glad I went through those lessons in my 20s. I was broken in debt for most of my 20s, and I see it as a training camp. You know, I see life, even to this day, I see it as a training camp, and I always think about how life is training us and what it's doing to my character, how all these experiences affect me, and how they affect the people around me, and how they train me into a different kind of person over time. And that's something that I started off with very proactively, because of the recovery period from the shoplifting. I realized I had to turn my character into someone different. Mm-hmm. And so I often think about, when I set goals or take on projects, how they're going to affect me as a human being. How will they shift my values or my behaviors or my attitudes, build up my experience in different ways. And that's been a really valuable perspective to have, is choosing projects not just for the immediate result, but asking yourself, how will this affect me as a person? How will this affect my character? I didn't know that when I stole my first cassette tape or CD or candy bar, what that would do to my character. I just saw it as the momentary thrill. But now when I make a decision to get into something new, even a one-time action, I think, what will this do to my character, especially if I continue that or if it becomes a habit? And I become a lot more aware and sensitive to those long-term effects. And so that to this day helps me focus a lot on choosing good habits and being careful of the actions I take.
I remember one of the first times you wrote about that, Steve, and I don't remember what the article was called. And I was like, I had this big aha moment reading that. I was like, oh man, he's totally right. Especially in terms of your occupation, how that shapes your character. I think that might have been what the article was about. And your business, if you own a business, how that shapes your character. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a powerful way to frame it, because you are programming yourself with the habits you decide to adopt, and you're shaping. I mean, how did that come to you? How did that idea? I know it's such a funny question, like where did that idea come from? But was that something that was percolating for a while, or?
I think it really landed with me when I was sitting in jail, and I finally connected the dots between what my actions were doing to me as a person. I'm like, it really struck me. The actions I took, they turned me into a criminal, because I didn't see myself so much as a criminal up to a certain point, and other people started seeing me that way, and it didn't really quite feel right, because I'm just doing this as like a thing for a thrill. Does that make me a criminal? And then I realized it actually does. And when that finally sunk in, and I thought, not only a criminal, now I'm going to be a prisoner. I'm like, wow, that's not what I set out to be or do. And how did I end up here? And I just thought through, and I tried to think through it rationally. What did I do that got me to this point? How did I end up becoming in a situation where I'm going to end up in prison? Mm-hmm. What got me to that point? And I realized the mistake was not making decisions with enough attention paid to the long-term consequences, especially the consequences to my future self. Mm-hmm. I was the one that sentenced my future self to, potentially a prison sentence because of my earlier actions. And that got me really thinking about the connection between how our actions sculpt who we are. And, starting first with just the consequences of your actions, what that does to your life. Mm-hmm. But then over time, really thinking about how to cure that. And I realized in order to cure that situation, in order to stop taking those foolish kinds of actions, I actually had to think much more consciously about what type of character I wanted to become. Because if I did that, if I could think about the kind of character I wanted to become, then I could set goals and break them down into actions and projects that would make me into that type of character. So for instance, going to school and graduating 3 semesters, I was thinking about, I want to be an achiever. Mm-hmm. I want to be a person who sets really challenging goals and goes after them and achieves them. That's why I set that kind of goal. It was largely to shift my character in a different direction, and also it was a goal kind of born out of a bit of shame. I wanted to distance myself from the recent past of what I've done with the arrests and the shoplifting and the craziness, and I wanted to just change my own self-image for me, and that really did it when I just decided I want to be a different kind of person, and here's what I'm going to do to make that happen. And then, going on into business, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't want to be an employee anymore. And to this day, I haven't been anybody's employee since 1992 when I worked at a video game store.
Woo.
So that was, that was a decision. I wanted to be independent. Who do you want to be in life? Think about how that affects you. Like now I'm a vegan because I chose to be a vegan. Been a vegan for over 20 years, and I've been running regularly. Like this morning, I got up at 4:30 in the morning, ran 5 miles or so, and that's just normal habits, like part of my day.
Yeah. Because
I want to have good energy. I want to be a character of high energy and good focus and good concentration. And I found out that cardio exercise is just an absolute key to that. Yep. There's a great book about it called Spark. Which is about the mental benefits of cardio exercise. And it's just when I read that book, I was just like, okay, I got to exercise.
Is that the book with the running stick figure on the cover?
Not sure. I don't recall.
I
don't recall what the cover of it looks like because it was years ago that I encountered it, and I've read it twice and just loved it.
I'll have to put it in the show notes. So for people who they're on board with this, and I want to touch on veganism too. I'm a vegan as well. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But before we get to that, for people who go, okay, I get it. I want to change my character. I'm going to consciously decide the direction of my life, right? Then usually the next step becomes, okay, there's a little bit of self-discipline that has to come into that, right?
So you mentioned about needing a little bit of discipline, and that one I disagree with. I'd say it takes a lot of discipline. And in fact, the acceptance of that, we resist that it takes discipline. And that's a problem because if you play a character that resists discipline, you're screwed. There's so many things in life that require good, strong, high levels of discipline to be able to access them. Yeah. There's so many rewards and accomplishments and experiences that you just simply cannot access with weak discipline. And so
it's true.
When I realized that, and that happened a bit later on, when I realized that, it made me decide, okay, I'd better embrace discipline because I didn't want to do that initially. Like many people, I saw discipline as like, okay, that's a bad thing. That's fine if you're in the military or whatever. But, if you're a civilian, then you should be more into freedom and, happiness and flow and rebellion and all that stuff. And that didn't work. Yeah. It just made me feel worse about my character. And when I invested in becoming a more disciplined character, I found that I just really liked and enjoyed my character so much more. Right. The challenge of doing something disciplined it made me feel great, way better than being a lazier character or being a less disciplined character,
or being unfocused.
Or being unfocused, yeah. So focus is another quality you can choose to develop in your character. Now, I can be disciplined, and I can also love freedom and spontaneity. I love spontaneity. Sometimes I'll go on spontaneous trips, like just make a decision to go on a trip, and 24 hours later I'm on a plane or something, or I'm there. And I enjoy that. But the reason that can happen in my life and keep my life in balance is that I temper it with discipline, is that I know when it's okay to do that now and then, when I can relax the discipline a bit. But I have to have that baseline habit of strong discipline, good work habits, good exercise habits, good diet habits, and so on. Otherwise, my life just starts falling apart and I start feeling worse about myself.
Right. Don't you feel like there's one step kind of before, at least one step before discipline is actually deciding where you want to go, right? Discipline's like the warrior that can get you there, but...
That's how I initially framed it too. And now I just find that focusing on creating a more disciplined character is kind of its own reward in a way. Like I could just focus on that as an interesting goal for a while. That's been a big part of my focus for this year, is
Right.
doing a lot of running. One of my challenges this year is to blog every single day, and I've not missed a single day this year. I've posted something new to my blog every single day
Since Christmas, right?
I started on December 24, so that's
Yeah.
yeah. So it's been going well so far,
Yeah.
and I'll just keep going with that. And what I love about that habit is it's challenging. At first I kind of wanted to resist it, but after about 60 days or so, then I settle in and I start embracing the habit because I see how it's creating positive ripples in my life. Just that daily habit of writing, of pushing myself to do that. And not just pushing myself to do it, but pushing myself to get to the point where I can do it with no resistance, where I actually welcome the habit and I embrace it and I don't fight it anymore because I see the benefits of what it's doing for my character. It's helping me become more disciplined to maintain that habit, and I like the effects of that.
So do you go in with, I mean, okay, can I play devil's advocate for a second here though, Steve?
Sure.
Don't you feel like it's important to pick something that you already feel sort of drawn toward or you already feel some level of resonance with? Like you wouldn't want to set a goal for something that, that's entirely repulsive to you, but the medicine's going to be better than the pain it's going to take to get there. I mean, I guess I'm curious, where do you find that balance? Because you already enjoy contributing to the world through your website. You're already a great writer. It's something that's already pretty in alignment, very in alignment with your life path. Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, where do you calibrate for your alignment when it comes to goals like that?
Curiosity is one thing that really drives me. I wonder how different habits and different experiences will affect me. And a lot of the stuff I do, especially these personal growth experiments, are on a short-term basis. As you know, I'm really into doing 30-day challenges, where I'll pick something and dive into it for 30 days at a stretch. And that teaches me something each time. Some of those become long-term changes. Like in 1993, I did a 30-day. 1993 was the first time I remember doing a 30-day challenge. I did it during the summer, and it was between semesters in college. And I thought, I just want to try being a vegetarian for 30 days. And I didn't intend to do it long term. I just wanted to know what it was like to be a vegetarian for a little while because I was curious about it. And that habit somehow stuck, and I never went back. And then I did the same thing 3.5 years later. In January 1997, I went vegan for a month. And that stuck too and became a permanent long-term habit. So sometimes that curiosity, is what really helps you figure out what you want. I find that if I'm looking at something from the outside, never having experienced it from the inside, then I do not understand the interior perspective. I do not know what it's really like. And so you can have that grass is greener on the other side effect where you might be polishing it up a bit and get it, through rose-colored glasses, and then you get inside it and you're like, oh crap, I don't really like this. This is kind of a lot of work. That's true of career changes and relationship changes. How do you changing cities? How did you know you would like living in Hawaii before you moved there? like probably some things about it you discovered that you might not like. And so if I were looking at considering moving to Hawaii, what I might do is let's go move there for a month or a year, but not overcommit to it and see if I like it. Then I know what the interior perspective of it is like. I know what it's like to be a resident. When I moved from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, I rented a place. My wife Erin and I, we rented a house first for a year to see if we would like it, and it turned out we really liked it, and then we stayed and we ended up settling here. But if we didn't like it, we could have gone back to LA or we could have gone somewhere else. So we didn't overcommit with that. So I like having that kind of testing philosophy with a lot of things in life, because I often find that when I test something, it surprises me. My first test of going vegetarian surprised me. So I always had that in the back of my mind. What if I try something I don't expect to continue and it sticks? Or what if I try something that I expect to stick and then I realize I don't want to continue? I want to give myself that flexibility. So always testing it and knowing what it's like is super helpful. It prevents a lot of regret later on.
Well, that's sort of what happened to me with Hawaii. Is I thought I was just going to be here for the summer, and I unintentionally did Like a 60-day trial.
Okay. And how long is it now?
Oh, well, I was here for about 2 years, and then I left for 2 years, and I've been back for 2 years at the end of this month,
Okay.
which is a whole nother story. I'm loving how this flow of this conversation is going, Steve. Do you want to go for another half an hour, or do you have to go
Sure.
sooner?
I'm open the rest of the afternoon, so.
Because this is just a lovely. I'm really enjoying this, and I feel like we have a couple more avenues to explore.
Sure.
But you were one of the first people to. I wonder what article that was where you were talking about the value of being on the inside or being on the outside of an idea. And if you're on the outside looking in, you really have no idea what the reality of that is. And you have to be on the inside. And that's the value of those 30-day trials, of which I've done a few too. And it's been so fun watching you do these over the years and often seeing the pronounced results like months, 6 months, 12 months after you've done them. A great one, and you probably knew this was coming, it was your polyphasic sleep, your polyphasic sleep trial, which was just fascinating to watch. I know very few people can be polyphasic in this society in a way that's really harmonious. I think it seems challenging to me. I haven't done it though. I'm on the outside looking in on polyphasic sleep, but I know for people who don't know, do you want to talk about a little bit about what polyphasic sleep is? You're probably better explaining it than I am, and maybe just like a lesson you pulled out of that, because you got featured on a bunch of places for doing it. It's such a fascinating consciousness experiment. I feel like the interview wouldn't be complete without us touching on polyphasic.
Sure. That was something I learned about from the internet. Some other blogger had written about it, and I thought that sounds absolutely fascinating and weird, and kind of want to try it. So there's a number of variations of it. Polyphasic just means many phases. So it means sleeping not just in one long stretch of slumber each night, but breaking it up throughout the day. And the version I did was probably the hardest. I didn't quite know how hard it would be at the time. But it was. I think some people call it the Uberman schedule. That's what I saw people referring to at the time. But it's basically.
You started out on hard mode? That doesn't sound anything like you, Steve.
Yeah, well, I didn't know how hard it would be. I was like, oh, going without sleep, sure,
That was sarcasm.
I leaned into it, and it was a fun adaptation period. But the version I did was you sleep 20 minutes at a time, every 4 hours around the clock. So, for instance, you might take a 20-minute nap at 1 a.m., 5 a.m., 9 a.m., then 1 p.m., 5 p.m., 9 p.m., and that's all you sleep. There's no long nighttime stretch, and you just do that continuously. So you're basically living your life in 3-hour and 40-minute blocks of being awake. Now, one of the dumbest questions I get ever is people telling me, I still get questions about that to this day. That was back in 2005 to 2006 I did. It was for 5.5 months.
I know.
One of the dumbest questions people keep asking is like, I have a full-time job, and can I do this? No, you can't. It's like if you can't get the nap breaks in, you can't do that. If you don't have the way to live your life in 3-hour and 40-minute chunks, and don't have access to nap breaks all the time, you can't really do that. I did it. I actually went on one trip during that time. I think it was to the San Francisco Bay Area. I remember like having to take breaks and take naps, like going through Golden Gate Parks. And I'm like, okay, got to pull over, take a nap in the car or in the park or something.
Right.
And then you can go back to doing stuff. And then, yeah, it was weird. Like Aaron and I were in a hotel room, I think in Emeryville. And
Pixar land.
Yeah, actually, well, back then and when, I don't know if Pixar was there at the time.
That's a good point. This is the before times.
Not sure when they started, but yeah, when I used to live in Emeryville too in the 90s, and that area was just like where Pixar is, was just like old warehouses and things, I think.
Right.
And then I went back more recently, and it's all been gentrified essentially and just made into a whole different shopping area.
I feel like being polyphasic would lend itself to driving across the country.
I don't know. I mean, I guess if you get really good at sleeping in the car was not super restful for me.
Right.
But to this day, from doing that experiment, I'm just awesome at taking 20-minute naps. Like almost always, I could just go to sleep, sometimes within seconds. Like I can literally fall asleep sometimes in 1 second or less.
I think Rochelle told me once that you have this uncanny ability, to fall asleep in less than 5 seconds, and she doesn't even know if
Yep.
you're asleep. It's like, oh, he's asleep now.
Yep, I didn't used to have that. Like, we might go to bed and then she'll say something to me and I'm like, okay, and we have a little conversation and then I'm thinking, okay, I'll go to sleep. And I fall asleep and then she starts talking again and I get scared awake. She's scared me awake probably hundreds of times by now since we've been in a relationship, because she doesn't, she knows how fast I can fall asleep, but she can't necessarily tell that I've gone to sleep in like the 1 or 2 second pause she's done, and I didn't realize she was going to continue talking.
I'd love to know how common that is, because I would love to have that ability. It almost makes me want to try polyphasic sleep.
Yeah, I don't know. I bet there's like apparently there's maybe some genetic aspect to it. There's a lot of people who just don't believe it's possible. I've seen these long write-ups by people just, saying that you can't do it. It's not possible. I was like, okay, whatever.
You clearly disproved that.
Well, there were other people doing this too. I've met some of them and they, we had conversations about it, but by and large, most people who try it just can't do it. Now, there could be a number of factors there. For one, I was vegan at the time. And maybe that's a factor. It could be genetic. It could be the fact that I had a lifestyle that could adapt to that very easily. I don't think it was all out self-discipline, because that's what people seem to suggest, that it's like you have to have this iron will and this iron self-discipline. I think it had more to do with just the strategy and maybe some genetics, maybe some habits that supported me. But like one thing I found was the hardest part to stay awake was between the 1 a.m. and the 5 a.m. naps. I could push myself to stay awake till 1 a.m., but when I was adapting, it's really tough to stay awake during that time. And even while I was still doing the polyphasic sleep and I got used to it, the 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. period was often the hardest to stay awake. So I tried different strategies there. Sometimes I would go out, since I live in Vegas, I would go out and play poker during that time. Okay, 3 hours and 40 minutes window to go play poker and come back.
That sounds fun. I heard you're pretty good at that. You used to count cards and stuff, right?
Well, that was at blackjack, but...
you're right. I'm getting them mixed up. A little bit harder to count cards in poker.
Yeah, but I was just playing low-limit poker, and I could win a little bit of money there. I was not betting a lot. I was like playing the $2 to $4 tables, and I might, on average, I might make like $2 an hour, but it passed the time.
Yeah. Because your body's sending you these signals. They're like evolutionary signals. Oh, it's nighttime now. Like at some point, you're like, oh, probably should sleep. It's 3 a.m. And you're pushing against that.
Poker wasn't great though. I mean, I tried that some nights, but I found, what actually worked best was cooking. TV would put me to sleep. Reading would put me to sleep. If I tried to exercise, it would kind of fatigue me more, and then I'd get tired afterwards. Especially doing it in the middle of the night. My body just didn't like exercising too much in the middle of the night, but cooking was great. So I would go to the kitchen and grab a recipe book and just make some dishes. And what that would do is it would give me some mental focus and also keep me up on my feet for most of that time. So I didn't nod off and get sleepy. It kept me moving, but not in such a way that it fatigued me or wore me out. So, I would just do a bunch of cooking and my wife would wake up in the morning and, find out like, oh, you made sweet potato curry. Awesome. Find all the stuff that was cooked during the night. So that was a good strategy. I don't know if other polyphasic sleepers, like what they were doing to stay awake during those nighttime hours. I think it was, more or less a struggle for everybody to get through the adaptation period. But finding little tricks here and there really helped.
Cooking. But it sounded like after doing it for a few weeks, because you did this for a while, right? You did this for like several months.
Yeah, 5.5 months total. And I stopped because it was just too weird socially. Yeah. I felt like being up all night by myself, it got kind of lonely. I didn't, like my family was not up all night. So it was like, I don't have these hours of empty space by myself. And a lot of people look at it like they see it as the productivity, angle, and just how awesome it will be to have 22 hours of waking time, because you're only sleeping 2 hours total a day, 6 naps times 20 minutes. So, but 22 hours a day is
way more
than you need. And I kind of liked the flow of the day. I kind of like having the end to the day. Because the day doesn't end with a 20-minute nap. It sometimes feels like, when you get used to it, it feels like you've been sleeping a couple hours when you sleep 20 minutes. So it does feel like you've got some deep sleep because you get this time dilation effect. But it's still weird when you realize how long a day is. And when I realized, at one point, I realized now it's Christmas. But for me, it's like the same day as Halloween. It's like the same continuous day. There's been no break. There's been this continuous.
Why does it feel like Halloween since Christmas 2017?
Yeah, and then it's like New Year's, and it's like still the same day, and it just won't end. And I don't know. It's like psychologically, it became increasingly uncomfortable, and socially, physically, I got through the adaptation, but I just didn't want to keep doing it for the feeling of being so out of sync with the rest of the world.
And it also feels like, you get these 20-minute flashes, and it'd be really interesting to hook you up to like an ECG or something like that to see how deep, or even like a brainwave monitor, because, you're in Delta, but how often are you able to dip lower than that? Usually we go in and out of these REM cycles of 90 minutes alternating, right? So I wonder if your body is able to regenerate as much.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't have that kind of data on it. I wasn't doing any kind of, special monitoring of myself, or
right.
Didn't have any kind of special equipment. So I have no idea what that would report.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, Steve, of like, yeah, you had a family at that time, and there were like kids in the house when you were doing this, right? How old are your kids? You have 2 kids.
Yeah, well, at the time I was doing that, my son was 2 and my daughter was like 5.
Wow.
So yeah.
Was that challenging in terms of noise, or I guess your space has got enough?
No, we had a 2-story house and the bedrooms were upstairs. Yeah. So I would just mostly stay downstairs. The kitchen was downstairs, so it was kind of like I had the downstairs to myself at night, and then they had the upstairs to themselves at night. But I got a little impatient. It's like, okay, it's like 6 a.m. Let's get up, people. So I did this kind of thing, which was sort of nasty, called I called it bear bombing, because I would call them bears because they're always hibernating. So I referred to my family members as bears because it seemed like they were always sleeping for the winter. It seemed like they were sleeping so much of their lives, and I just thought, okay. So I would get a little like pocket digital stopwatch kind of thing, and I'd set a timer on it to go off in like 2 seconds, and I'd open the door to one of the bedroom, and I'd set the timer to go, and I'd just toss it on the bed and then close the door, and I would just like beep 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 beep. It was like throwing a
little grenade,
alarm clock grenade, essentially, just to wake them up.
I feel like I should warn our listeners. Steve has a very special mind, and your performance may vary. Don't compare yourself to Steve. I've fell victim to comparing myself to Steve sometimes. Don't do it. We all have our different gifts.
Well, I feel like we should do as Bruce Lee, and we should not compare ourselves to others. We should compare ourselves to our past selves.
Yes,
that was his recommendation. So I kind of take that one to heart. So hey, if I applaud myself for staying out of jail all this time.
That's the thing. I'm so glad that you've joined the light side of the Force, because the dark side wanted you.
Yeah, well, I wasn't very good at the dark side,
You're pretty good, though, smuggling that stuff out and not getting caught for that long. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it was like 16, 18 months, something like that. So it ran its course.
You could have been running a mob by now. You could have been the head of an MLM. You missed your shot, Steve.
Yeah. I just didn't like the effects.
Big fat cat on top of the pyramid.
Yeah, but it was a good experience to go through, because it taught me, it was like some courage training, but it also just showed me where I wanted to take my values. I don't think I would have had as much control over my character path going forward, and as much say in what kind of person I became if I hadn't had that reckless time and went through that experience and just saw very clearly how my decisions were screwing up my life badly. I think many people have that feeling, but it's like, what I was feeling it on a scale of 1 to 10 is like a 10 at the time when I was in jail. Many people, it doesn't get past a and you feel like something's not right in your life. You don't like where it's heading, but you don't feel like you're totally in control of steering it. And it's like this malaise enters in, and you just sort of settle for less person you really want to be. And I've noticed a lot of people who really sculpt their lives into something that's desirable for them. They've often had some pretty bad experiences in the past, maybe trauma or some other, experience that just shocked them. And they just decided, I got to steer this person better.
Steer your character.
Yep.
The way you talk. I love the way you bring your, and for people who aren't as familiar with your work, I love the way you bring this perspective of life as a game, but in a playful way, but also a game that has ramifications, and you really think of it in terms of, you're literally like a character in whether or not this reality is a simulation or not. I love the way you bring that sort of programmer side. I see that as your programmer side of like, you can reprogram your reality. I mean, I know we went on a walk through Las Vegas once, and you were saying how one of the things you like about Las Vegas is it's changing so much. It's almost like the Matrix. The code's being rewritten so often. I feel like all of that is interrelated.
Yeah, I probably mentioned something like how Vegas treats physical space like software. They can rip out a dining establishment and stick in a bar or a gift shop or something. They're constantly reconstructing their physical space. Now they're having to do it again with the social distancing. I was just learning this morning about how Vegas is planning to reopen, and I hope they don't go too fast too soon for the sake of other people's lives.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing, they're going to have like blackjack tables instead of like 6 people at a blackjack table. They'll have 3. They'll have them spaced out more. Okay. At a craps table, instead of 15 people, they'll have 6. Can you imagine playing craps with just 6 people at the table? That's going to be kind of interesting. They're going to shut down every other slot machine and remove the chairs so that there's space between the slot machines. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Wow. Yeah, it's been kind of, as an aside, it's been really your commentary on the pandemic. I don't want to make this too timely because what's great about your work is so much of it applies just as much here in 2020 as it will in 2030, 2040, 2050. But I would be remiss if we didn't touch on just, it's been funny seeing your reactions to the coronavirus coverage. And you're like, the mayor is an idiot. It's like, we need to make sure that, was it the mayor's? No, the mayor wanted to reopen, but the governor was like, no.
She wanted to basically use Vegas as a petri dish for experimentation, and just like, screw you.
Yeah.
So no, in fact, there was one local poker player who was pretty outraged and has been starting a recall campaign to get her removed.
Get the mayor removed?
Yeah, exactly. Get the mayor removed. Like hold an emergency election and get her out. And he's already been collecting collecting signatures or something like that. I think he needs something over 6,000 signatures to make it happen. And who knows? Because people who live here in Vegas, our death rate is not as high as in some other places in this whole state of Nevada. Most of the population of Nevada lives in Las Vegas, but in the whole state of Nevada, we have, I think, 300 something, who've passed away. It's maybe coming up on 400, and somewhere in the
it's relatively low.
Maybe 6,000 something infections. I haven't checked the numbers lately, but it was like somewhere around there last time I checked.
Right.
And it's. But the main risk is all the tourists coming back and bring from places with much higher infections.
Yep. Same thing here in Hawaii.
Same thing with Hawaii, because Hawaii, Wyoming, they have very low death rates.
Yeah,
and
we're doing well.
You bring all the tourism back, and that's a big risk. So, the tourists will infect the locals who work on the strip and in downtown, the casinos and food services and so on, and then they bring it all back to the rest of the community. Right. So the locals are not necessarily wanting the place to open too soon. Even the people whose livelihoods depend on it. The local vibe I'm seeing is people want to be somewhat cautious and smart about it, especially the people who are going to have a high chance of getting infected just through interactions with so many people.
I think the one silver lining I've seen about this, though, is that some of the preliminary antibody testing, it looks like the people, this is all I've been talking about for the last 3 weeks, but it seems like the reinfection rate from the data I've seen is pretty low. So it's it's going to be interesting to see how many people have actually had this. We haven't done a large scale blood antibody test yet, so hopefully it's I don't know. It's a challenging time. It's really.
Yep, it is. And I mean, the Las Vegas economy is going to be. I mean, it's highly affected by this, of course.
Right.
I mean, the unemployment rate is pretty high now because everything's shut down. It's the whole city runs on tourism.
Yep, sounds familiar. You want to try a really weird pivot? This is fun.
Sure.
So, if you were to look at this pandemic through a subjective reality context, ellipsis. Because subjective reality is the idea of, I don't know if the oneness is built into it, but it can be, of like, you are shaping reality based on your beliefs, and reality is very pliable. How do you define subjective reality these days? Because you had an amazing series on it years ago, and you looked like your whole life as a dream for several months. It was very fascinating to read, and it almost felt like I was reading your journal.
Yeah, we have a whole course on this, 60-day course on this called Submersion, which is like subjective reality immersion. So the idea, though, is imagining that you're living in a dream world or a matrix. It doesn't necessarily respond immediately to your thoughts and beliefs. I'm not saying that you have total control over it. However, you do have an interface to it, and that you can communicate with it. So you can communicate with reality. So if you are living in some kind of programmed simulation or some kind of dream world, and you can communicate with the simulator or with the dreamer, say just like I'm talking to you now, saying your intentions aloud, at conversing with it, you might be able to influence it in some way. So I did a lot of experiments testing along those lines. So like to put the coronavirus situation, to frame that, it's a very individual thing. So if you're looking at this like, this is my reality and I'm in this simulation or I'm in this dream world, why would my dream or my simulation bring up this virus thing? What's the point? And it's always an invitation. And so it's an invitation to what, though? And so you have to look at it from your own personal perspective. If you don't, then you get into problems where you're projecting it onto other people who may not even be real. So
right.
From that perspective, so that's where people get really messed up, is they say, well, what about how did it affect this baby over here? And I'm like, are you the baby? No, then you can't use that perspective. You got to just use it in a self-referential way. So the way I see it may not be the way you see it or the way anyone else sees it, but the way I see it is it's been an invitation for me to focus more internally, like on my own character, because it's a break from all the external socialization, this conversation notwithstanding. But I've had to cancel all the in-person meetups. My wife and I are having groceries delivered. It's been a lot of changes. We actually just went grocery shopping yesterday for like the first time, I think.
2 months?
At least together. So yeah, we went to Costco, which was quite an experience with everyone wearing masks and stuff, and Trader Joe's as well. And that was, it was an interesting experience, just seeing, their interactions with people and, how it is. But it's because it's cocooned us so much, and we're used to working from home, but now it's like even more cocooning. It's helped me focus more on my habits and thinking, more about where do I want to take my character. And it's been super productive as well. Like I've been getting so much work done. It's been great. And income-wise, this year is like my best ever so far, which is nice. But partly just because of the extra focus from just being at home and like, okay, just stay here and work, or, have interesting experiences. And, we feel very fortunate because we have an online business. And so it's been very modest adaptations to flow with that. But it's really been helping me, helping me a lot, just, really focusing deeply on my goals. And, I realize I have a tendency to spread myself too thin sometimes, taking on too many social obligations. Even when it seems like it's not a lot, it can really take my focus away.
It's like, how much mental RAM is that taking up?
Yeah, and now I'm just like going through project after project, close that project, next project, let's start this, get it done, finished, close that loop, next project. And just, one project at a time. A project may take a few days, it may take a few weeks, but just, one by one, just working on these projects that are helping me achieve my goals. And it's really nice, both on the personal side and the and the professional side. So I don't know, when things open back up again, it might make me reevaluate how I want to do certain things in my life.
I echo that as well. What you're talking about kind of reminds me of like 500 things. But one of the things is when you declared social bankruptcy, I think it was like, I just remember that year you started out by saying, I'm declaring social bankruptcy. And my first impression, blog post, and ostensibly that a lot of people that obviously a lot of people you respect read this, you're like, you like super rank in Google and you've killed it. And just to say, I'm declaring social bankruptcy publicly inspired me so much. I was like, Steve is not afraid of social backlash at all. Are you afraid of any social backlash at all? It was just amazing to me. Like you really, your own opinion of yourself seems to be foremost. And I think it allows you to take risks and do things that most people can't or don't let themselves.
I'd say I'm a much harsher judge of my own character than other people are. And so when there's a social backlash, I realize it doesn't really have much to do with me. It just has to do with what I represent to other people. Because most of the people doing the backlashing don't even know me that well. Yeah. My good friends, business partners, things like that, they don't backlash against me because they know me well. And they know me and they accept me as I am. They just know that's part of my personality to explore and try different things and stuff. So they tend not to have a problem with any of that kind of stuff. The ones who do the backlashing would be people on social media who have never even met me in their entire lives. And so they're not backlashing against me, so I don't really take it personally. I just see it as like, this has nothing to do with me. And part of the reason is like, I would write an article and I'd get a piece of feedback on it that would just praise it as like the best thing ever written. And the next email would be, ripping into the article is the worst piece of crap I've ever written. And I almost want to like send, forward those emails to people that sent them. Like, here's another opinion. You have this opinion. I read that Dr. Wayne Dyer did that once, and I thought, that's great. That's hysterical. So, in both cases, I might just respond to the email with a smiley and just, you take it in stride. But you don't have to take that on for yourself. You don't have to, take criticism so personally. When you realize it has way more to do with the critic. If somebody wants to spend time writing a 500 or 1,000 word email telling me what's wrong with me, I sometimes
Steve, you're going to hell for that.
Exactly. I get those sometimes. The ones filled with Bible quotes. This is not even about me. This has nothing to do with me. It's about what I represent to that person.
I still struggle with that though, Steve. I don't know why. Because I'm a sort of an empath, and that's one of the more interesting things that I've grown through is seeing that affect me less and less. Because having 6 books out and just looking at the reviews and seeing how that can vary, and also just email. It's such a beautiful growth experience of letting that go more. I think I still have more to go, but it sounds like you got used to that really early on. I mean, your Pavlina.com taking off really fast, it seemed like. Was that a difficult calibration period for you? I mean, probably not as difficult as it would have been for me.
I think I calibrated on that kind of thing before I started my blog. When I went through the shoplifting stuff and the arrests, I disappointed myself and I disappointed all the people around me. And I got to the point where nobody expected anything of me. Like everybody thought poorly of me.
Right.
Having to deal with that and go through the recovery period, it just makes the stuff that happens on social media, it just doesn't get to me because they're just not digging deep enough. They're lazy. They seriously, I think they suck at criticizing. Because what I had to go through, where I harshed on myself, I was way better at it than anybody else has been. So the stuff they're getting, it doesn't dig deep enough. It's not getting to my heart. It's just deflecting off the surface. It's just bouncing off my skin. It's like they're just not doing a very good job. Wow. So
you could beat on yourself better than they could.
I think my critics suck. I think I could be way better at criticizing myself than anybody else who has, especially people who've never even met me.
Yeah.
So they just don't have a chance. And so I found that over time, almost all of my critics from the early years of blogging, they've long since given up. I think maybe I just made them cry at some, they're just like, I can't handle it. Every time I criticize them, all I get back is a smiley face. So I love responding to critics with a smiley face, just : close parentheses, send. And it's great because what do they do with that? You know,
Shifts the energy in a big way.
yeah, it's like I'll just smile at them. But you know, every once in a while, somebody will give me a piece of criticism, and I'll be like, yeah, that's kind of valid. But chances are it's something I've already identified in myself that I want to work on. It's rare that somebody points out something that I'm not already aware of. And if it is something new, and I go, oh, okay, is that, you know, that's how people are perceiving me? And I think, is that bothersome to me? Do I have a problem with that? Is that something I really want to work on in my character? How do I feel about that?
Right.
A lot of times people criticize me for stuff that I feel totally fine with. You know, like criticize me for being a vegan all day long. you have no chance of not getting off of that course.
Same.
There's no chance.
Same.
You know, I've heard all the arguments. They're just all ridiculous. They just all bounce off me. There's nothing that's
Steve,
gonna.
where are you getting your protein? What about B12?
Yeah, that one again. You get your protein.
I laugh so much though. It's
like,
such a it's jumping the shark at this point. Like all you have to do is just a little bit of research. It's so funny.
Yeah. So when it's, you know, when it's that kind of surface stuff, it doesn't have that kind of impact. But I think what really helps you build a strong foundation against against criticism that's off base is you really got to get your own character on base. You really got to get yourself to the point where you like and appreciate and love and respect and honor the character that you are and the character that you're becoming. This is not being free of faults. You can have a lot of, you're still working on, but as long as you're working on it and you're making progress and you're on a path of growth and you like the direction you're going, then other people's criticism it's not going to put really much of a dent in that, because you're going to feel so fulfilled by the path you're on. And that's how it's been for me. I'm so fulfilled by the path I'm on, and I'm so excited about that. And I draw so much energy from that I think when you get yourself to that state, for the most part, the critics don't bother. I get very little criticism these days, especially relative to my web traffic. It could go several weeks before I get even one critical email.
Wow.
And I think it's just because people, I think there's some kind of energy communication between us, to be honest.
I think
see
so.
some evidence of this. And I think when you really feel good about who you are and you're not worried about being criticized, it doesn't attract it. But when you are feeling insecure and you know your life isn't quite working, then I think you feel much more vulnerable. And I think that's what critics seek out. I think they
smell it.
The vulnerable. They prey upon the weak. And when you feel that weakness in yourself and you feel like I'm not really where I want to be, I'm not really heading the right direction, then you start putting up shields with to the critics, and that's what the critics can sniff out from a mile away. Oh, that person's very shielded. Let's go after them.
Or looking at it from a subjective reality context, you're attracting that element of reality in. If you're not in alignment, if you have doubt, then you might see that doubt reflected. You used to talk about like an alpha reflection and a beta reflection from the universe. That can happen with criticism or negative experience too. Right?
Exactly. And then you can see it as an invitation from reality to, hey, work on this part of yourself. Pay attention to this. If the criticism does get under your skin, maybe it's because there's something there that needs to be worked on. Maybe, like if somebody criticizes you for not exercising and that bothers you, well, maybe you should be exercising. Maybe that's the reason it's getting to you. Because if it's not getting to you, then it's probably not something you need to work on. And in which case, if the criticism will subside tremendously if it's not getting to you. But if something is getting to you, when you get criticized in a certain area and it gets under your skin, that you can see that as an invitation, from your reality. Like the simulation is saying, hey, Andrew, you got to work on this area. I'm going to keep bringing critics up in your reality, and they're going to keep picking away at you until you accept this invitation to work on this.
And that's the end of part 1. We talked for so long that I had to break this up into 2 parts. There's even going to be an after show on my Patreon. But before I leave you, I want to say a big mahalo to Steve for sharing much of his afternoon with me. It was truly an honor and hilarious. It was such a delight. Also, if you've enjoyed this interview, there are more, and iTunes is the easiest way to find them and get new ones as they come out. Just search for Aravinda Show on there. That's ARAVINDA. And if you use Instagram or Twitter, I'm at Hello Crusoe on there. That's @ the word hello, CRUSOE. And I post samples of interviews on there when they come out. plus behind the scenes glimpses of my life here on the Big Island of Hawaii. So it's a lot of fun. And be sure to check out stevepavlina.com. His website kind of changed my life, especially in college. And he's posting his stuff on Facebook now. And, it's worth looking at his online courses and Conscious Growth Club. The work he's doing there is pretty incredible. And he has over 1,000 articles on personal growth. They're all free. Of course, all these links that we've mentioned will be available in the show notes for this episode over at Mythly. That's MYTH.LI as in lizard iguana. Click on Aravinda Show or Aravinda Spacecast, depending on the label that I'm using this month, and you'll be able to find show notes for the episode and all the great shows, as well as free samples of my books, including, of course, my true Hawaii action memoir, 10,000 Hours in Paradise, the incredible story of what happened to me when I moved from Wisconsin to Lower Puna on the Big Island of Hawaii, a story so true that I had to give everyone pseudonyms and so full of magic that you won't be able to put it down. And you can get the first 20% of that by going to my website and clicking on Get 3 Free Books. Really easy to find in the menus. Also, and this is very important, if you've enjoyed this interview and want to support this show, the best thing you can do is leave a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. They're the same thing now. It really helps rank the show higher and get these interviews to more people. Even a one-sentence review helps more than I can say. I'm Andrew Crusoe. Thanks again for listening, and we will return with the second and final part of this interview, in which I make a rather surprising admission, and Steve delves into subjective reality, beliefs as lenses, and fascinating dives into the variety of human relationships, including open relationships. You'll really want to hear the second part. I'm just going to say that. See you next time. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it, and aloha.